Mic check. Looks good. Welcome to the channel. This is Reliable Rudy. Getting a couple things set up. Volume's good. Got some title names to go over, but before we go into any of the stock market analysis or breakdowns, you guys know I'm not a licensed financial advisor. Everything in this video is me just sharing my opinion, nothing more, nothing less, trying to give you guys some entertainment. I'm just a guy. At the end of the day, I'm just a guy, trying to make a little bit of money doing what I love to do and trying to give you guys something to watch in the process as well. So I hope that's made clear. The first title name we have for the day, it felt really good throwing ENPH on there. Our fill came in at 126.50. It's been dropping down. Uh, you can see the 127s. I was looking for this to start showing some wick pressure into this. It might be a knife for today, and we might have some more downward pressure. I'd expect if it did catch a bid back up to this previous low, we are going to see some rejections of these 127.50s. Is what I would expect. Um, but I was very excited to start dipping into ENPH a little bit, getting that position going. And as you can see off the daily chart, not a great look. Rejecting the level, we're not quite there on strength. And my next area is probably down towards that 120 flat, maybe at those 125s a little bit. But I have been waiting very patiently for these 120s. And this is the first average we've had on the name since the earnings. So I don't know what it dropped our average down to. We can go take a look at that. But let's go take a look and see what that dropped our average down to. For ENPH, let's go see. Our new average on ENPH got moved down from 166 down to 139.71. So, take it for what it's worth. I'm still down significantly on the position, but down here at the bottom end, I'm playing this like support. So if it does want to show some exhaustive moves to the downside, 120 to 118 is going to be that next area. Have a couple wick lows down here in the lower teens. Gap free though, we don't have any gaps in this. The next gap that we really have is this 106 gap. So we're going to play it accordingly. We're not oversizing into the position. But if ENPH wants to get down underneath 110, we're not going to wait exactly for that gap fill. We're going to be dipping into it. And if it does want to fill that gap at 106 or maybe even come down underneath $100, we look at it as an undervalued asset. And, we're aware that the next earnings report, the guidance was bad. It's going to be the first quarter that they're not going to put up growth from a revenue and an EPS perspective. But, moving forward, years, 2 years, 5 years ahead, we think that we are building into something that is going to be a fundamentally sound company, something that we can hold for the long term. So I hope that's made clear. By no means, this chart setup, this is probably going to keep showing that continuation to the downside. So I'm not sitting here saying, oh, yep, bottom's in, load up on it. No, I'm just sizing accordingly into this position. So I hope that is made clear. Going to some other title names, NKLA, we said we were going to play this at 150s. We never really just seen an opportunity to play it at 150s. We watched it a little bit yesterday. We had that small order size that we've held all the ways from, 370. It would have been nice to just say, yeah, let's just cut it, the whole thing. But we didn't. We started our fill off at the beginning of the day. We actually had 125 order in, and it's basically just playing this gap fill. So if I go back, I took the gap off, but here's a 126 gap. We said, hey, 125, let's throw an order out there. And at the very beginning candle, we got a partial fill for those 125s. And it caught a bid. It was sitting up at 128. Okay, whatever. But then it kind of gave up those 125s. We got a 122 fill, and we got this 120. And I'm going to show you why I put that 120 order in, just running a fib tool, top move, bottom move. That 120 right here, you can see is that last retracement. So we did get a fill, it got as low as 19s, and we have an open order for these 116. So if this wants to drop down, I think 116 is going to be that last order that we have for this name, and then we'll think about putting a stop in. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So be it. I'm not going to sit here and say, yep, this is a no-brainer long. We're just going to hold it against us all the ways to the downside. But if these 125s, 120s are able to hold, I think there's some reasonable upside back up to this top end resistance where maybe we can think about cutting it or just cut a majority of the position. And if it catches a bid to these previous lows and maybe your 21, your 34, we can go from there and trim accordingly. But to run this from 150s, cut 80% of the position all the ways up to I think 350s, somewhere in the 350s was our top print, and then to hit reloads down here 25 cents below our original entry. Not quite the original size that we had, but if it does want to get down to this 116 gap, I believe that puts us back to our original entry. So we'll see how this ends up playing out. By no means am I saying yes, we got 120 fills right here. It's 5 pennies in the money. This is, oh yeah, hammer it. Just keep it. No. Uh, I'm in a different scenario where I feel I'm comfortable playing this, and we'll see where it goes from there. So I am gonna have some alerts out on this name. I'm just gonna put an alert in for those 120s. Let's just alert 122s if that wants to come back in and trigger us. We'll keep our eyes on this for a potential wick into this 116 gap and go from there. So moving on to the next title name, we're going to go over to BAC. BAC reclaiming those 28s and actually showing some strength on the day. I think Nvidia's probably getting a lot of buzz. I'm sure a lot of AI names are getting some buzz, but I'm gonna let them. I looked through the Nvidia earnings. Obviously, there's a lot of flashy numbers in that earnings report. Uh, I still think that's some fluff. I think over 500 is still a short, even though they did put up a pretty monstrous earnings report in terms of when you're just scrolling through it, you see all those large percentages, and you're just like, wow, what an earnings report. But a gap EPS of still 240. I still think we've seen a touch of overvaluation, and I think there's some true negatives in that earnings report for Nvidia in terms of they bought back 7.5 million shares. I just look at it, price of sales, not calculating in the revenue they put up in the quarter, but you're looking at a price of sales over 45. I think that's just still ridiculous. And they announced a $25 billion share repurchase program with a no expiration date on it. I just think if they're executing those shares, they're buying back overvalued shares. I disagree with the move. I'm just an average Joe sitting behind a computer, so what do I know? But I just don't see it. I don't see it. If they were really that secured, felt that security in their company, I would have liked to see those shares being bought back, before this move. But buying them up here, I question the decision making of the management. So, the way I'm going to go about this is once this runs over, once you see some trends start breaking down to the downside, I wouldn't be surprised if, let's say it runs up to 700. Just absolute ridiculous insanity. I think that would be the high in Nvidia for a long time. Possibly even 5, 10, even longer than 10 years. I think it would be setting the high for a long period of time. So, if you feel like you're missing out on this AI boom, eh, you got momentum, you got strength, you got a couple negative breaks right here to the downside, and you reclaim positive. Maybe you can catch some momentum further to the upside over 500. I don't know. It's just not something that I'm gonna play, and not something that I'm gonna preach to the viewers of this channel. If that's what you want to see, by all means, you're welcome to go elsewhere. But I just don't see it, guys. Um, But looking back at BAC catching a nice bid off the trend line. We had one fill in off those 28s yesterday, and we were on the bid at 28.08. That's just a gap fill. Respecting this gap fill. It doesn't look like that gap was ever filled. My alert to kind of put it on the map never even got triggered. Yeah, we'll leave BAC at that. If this wants to run up to the upside, we're not even going to think about trimming these levels. Honestly, I'd expect a rejection of these 29s and come back into this trend line. But now that we have this wick, I'm just going to keep this trend line like this. And next time we come in contact with it, I'm just going to respect it. Yeah, so that's the breakdown for BAC catching a nice bid. You know, I'm going to be holding these BAC shares for quite some time. Uh, Unless we were to get over top of this neckline, we'll think about trimming some levels up here in these mid 30s. But it's got to break a significant downtrend before it does anything in that retrospect. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. I'm very optimistic of how this could truly play out, but I really think that this is a very good long-term look down here, testing the waters with these 28s. And my position isn't quite back to fully reloaded. But we are getting very close to that original position. The average since we hit these reloads has gone up just a little bit. When we had that original position, our average was actually under 28s. Now I think it's a little bit over 28. So position just working accordingly. But I'm not going to brag about being up on a position over the course of a couple months. I want to see this position a couple years down the road as they continue buying back shares, continue increasing that dividend, and reinvesting those dividends back into the equity. That is what I'm going to be interested in. So to the next name, GM. I seen GM had a nice end to the day. It was able to get over top of this high and now kind of putting an indecision candle in the middle of this green candle right here. But all in all, you can see the kind of frowny face being made. Still a weak name, a smaller dividend. I'm not gonna rave about this name for the dividend. I will say I like that the dividend is small. It's only 9 cents. That allows the company to take a lot of that cash flow, a lot of that EPS, and put it back into the company, and also buy back shares. That is music to my ears. So the same thing goes. I said it yesterday that if it can show me it can get up into this, shortable level up here, which I would say this 34 and right in front of 34s looks like it would be an area potentially that could get shorted. If this starts to roll back over, I will respect these 3250s, but I gotta see at least a wick into this area. If it doesn't wick into that area, I'm looking for 32s. I'm looking for the trend line where we're going to, get some more size onto the position. But the next title name and the last title name is Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, we average up some more shares today at 75s, and you can probably see the catalyst why. We've seen this nice wick high, respected this short-term trend line from yesterday. Holding and opening above that was big. In the pre-market, I seen it was down at like 1260. So I was like, well, if this opens up below this trend line, we could be seeing a retest at 1250. But it showed a nice green candle and started coming back in. All we did was put an order in off 1275s, which was above this neckline. You can see it comes right back in below the closing price of yesterday. Now catching a nice bid, breaking over top of this flat top. So I'm very happy with this ad. Regardless, even if it comes back in, I would expect really good buying pressure off these 1270s. I'm not going to buy it. But I would expect some good buying pressure as this continues to hold. Now we have cleared out our chart. There's our trend line that we have over the last few days. But the bigger picture for this name is that a nice trend line bounce and a nice red move to the downside. What I wanted to see was these flat tops being discredited. here's your bottom wicks, and candle number one, candle number two, I'd expect some resistance off 13, but if this rolls back over and keeps holding this trend line, the move for today, if it were to get up and test those 13s, is just going to be building a neckline. So if it tests 13, comes back into 1250s, 1260s, and then breaks over 13, this is going to have a good look to maybe test back up towards a flat top. I know it's probably hard to see as of right now, but I'd say you're potentially building some sort of flat top off of these 1450s. And if this just builds a wedge pattern, all it would take is over 1450. If 1750 gap from these earnings back in last August gets filled, I think you're going to see an exhaustive move breaking through that flat top gap. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this name printing up at 22s. I know that might sound crazy, but that is what I'm going to be looking for. It might be hard to see right now, but a lot of that was hard to see with Invex as well. Now I'm not comparing the two companies. There's no similarities with the company. Maybe the chart setup is a little similar, but actually I'd say Invex's setup was a lot better. It had a monster level that it was actually truly building off that 7, and a false break of that. Trying to hold that middle ground gives a negative break and actually has reclaimed positive. Comparing that to Warner Brothers, you're just getting that false break short level. So, it's tough to say if there could easily be a big order if this gets back up to that middle ground. You could say that's your 13 flat. I say the big players are around that middle ground. If there's a big player trying to punch short on this name at that 13 level, this could easily start getting rejected to the downside. So that's my update for the title names. I did add another name, and looking at Enphase, those 126.50s, uh, in the money now. So I mean, uh, I would still be shocked if this didn't catch any resistance off those 127s, 127.50s, but we still don't really have the most amount of size for what my true vision is for this position. And I would expect this to show some continuation to the downside. In all honesty, this is going to be that next level that we really start hammering into this position. So by no means is this, oh, yep, we're back above Rudy's entry. This is going to be golden, though. I still think that this looks like it has some downside pressure. But we'll see. I'm really excited to see how Enphase plays out. I think, if you're looking at somebody, if you're thinking about shorting this company down here because of a weak forecast for one quarter, it looks like a short. I think you are very short term. Those people are looking very short term for a move downside. Uh, all it would take for this position to really get going is, we get back above 131s, 132s, and you're going to see this catch a nice pop. I don't, if it got over 132s, I think you would see it kind of fight through these lows, kind of set the level, and then probably trade sideways a little bit, give you a neckline to buy higher, and go from there. That's what I see with Enphase. I can see looking at some of these other names. Geo continuing to hold this 7 level is a reasonable look. Baba getting up towards that 91 level. We talked about 91 and we talked about how it wasn't able to fill that gap. Well, now that gap's filled. If this does want to roll back over and get back to those upper 80s, I say it every time on the live stream. The last 2 quarters, Baba's average shares bought back in their share repurchase program is 88 to 89. When the price is down there, you have that buyer. You have that $16.3 billion buyer on your side. And I think they're buying back cheap shares. When I talked about Nvidia early in the day, they're buying back shares. Okay, the price is up. You could say, oh man, they are very smart. Nvidia, super smart. 7.5, dude. I just think they're overpaying for their own shares still. I mean, you look at the gap EPS at 250. That's a long time, and maybe looking forward, they're expected $3. Okay, I still think if they're still only putting up $3 of EPS, maybe the quarter after they're getting close to the 4 EPS. Maybe after that they're getting close to the 5. Okay, if they do get to that point, maybe they are buying back good shares. Maybe if they get to over, $5 EPS a quarter, okay, maybe the high margin company that they are. I did see that their margins for the quarter were 70% when they've consistently been around that 50 to 60 range. Okay, I would say if you're really that bullish on Nvidia, I would flip your shares over to Microsoft. I think Microsoft trades at a little bit better valuation. You can see that EPS is right around that same range. They're expected not as much EPS growth, but just not as expensive. I think price of sales on this company is sitting around 14, 15. Okay, but you don't see Microsoft just unloading a lot of capital into buying back their own shares. Microsoft, I feel, did a very good job buying back a lot of its stock down here in the 200s, and I'd be surprised if they were unloading a ton of capital uh, up here. Because I think Microsoft does a lot better with their equity. That's personal opinion, but what do I know? DFS, notable move right here. We didn't have any buys yesterday in those 80s. God knows I wanted to. Lord knows I wanted to. You best believe I wanted to. But all in all, I still think that this bottom probably isn't in. But the big part is that they got this dividend out of the way. It gaps down, and now we're gapping up above the open price of yesterday. So kind of discrediting any continuation to the downside following the dividend. That doesn't mean that it can't just reject these previous lows right here at these 91.50s and go from there. So we will see. I would say a notable move and something to keep worry of. I'm not going to adjust my position at all. But Disney giving up this 85 level, does it catch any type of a bid from these 84s? One thing that I do like about it is that it didn't gap down below that and show that continuation. We pushed back up to 86s where 86 I was actually interested in yesterday. We ended up not putting an order in for it because it didn't get there when we thought it would. Something just felt off, so we just stayed away from it. Nothing changes. You can say that this is a bear flag, get that red move. You see it wicking into some levels. It was never able to get over that 87, where I said 87 is going to be where I'd say, okay, that's discrediting this bear flag move to the downside. Well, now you see the wick right up to 86 and giving up these lows. I would expect some continuation down the 84s. If it wicks in the 84s and reclaims these 85s, call it 85, 25, 85, 50, maybe there's something there. But I would say, pump the brakes a little bit. That's just honest opinion. I know there's probably some people out there that are like, man, Disney's trading at the same levels it was back in 2014. Yeah, it is. It's just not the same company it was back in 2014. I can see Warner Bros. Coming back on in 1270, so I'm an idiot for buying 75s. But we got fills at 50s, we are 53s, we got fills at 50s. We got fills yesterday. Where were we? Where were we? I believe it was 65s. Caught a nice bid, came back in. Now it's just holding the level. Is it going to break down? If it does break down, I do think these 1250s is a reasonable hold area, but we'll see. Looking at Nikola, you can see the bear flag, you can see the green candle came into 26s, and you can see the wick pressure, weak name on the 15 minute. I'm just looking for these 120s to hold. If 116 wants to fill, we will get back to that pretty much that original size on the position, and we'll see where it goes from there. So by no means am I saying that, yep, bottom's in on Nikola. No. Honestly, I'd say this probably looks like a short, but I think it looks more like a short for a retest of those 140s, 150s. So, and it is crossing over these 122s right now. So let's just clear out everything on this chart, and let's see if these buyers can hold these 120s. Low of this candle is 121s. Not a good setup. This looks like a short. You can see the increased volume giving up the lows. Some more selling pressure into the middle of that red move now. A red candle coming in. Looks like continuation to the downside. It's going to be whether or not these buyers can uh, hold it from dropping lower than this wick. You know, it can wick in the 116s. That's where we have our order. But if it wants to start giving us that curl, maybe there's something. Maybe there's some money to be made. So we will see. NVAX also catching a bit, you know, end phase getting beaten down. There's your continuation to the downside. You know, we'll wait for 120s, and if 118 to 119 wants to come on in, we will dip into a little bit there as well. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Nikola. Looking at some of these, the NQ is red on the day, which is, you know, very interesting, saying that NVIDIA up 3.7%. So that is very interesting. The SPY and the Dow slightly in the green. Uh, we'll see how today kind of plays out. It's still fairly early. So we'll see. Maybe we just need some time, but I will say that this 850 level, you know, just marking this high on Invax, you know, we stated that, you know, we did have a descending channel put in right here, and it was kind of getting discredited. But now that I can see the information, I'm just gonna put this downtrend in, sort of like this, and you know, maybe these are just some false breaks to the upside, but I do see this descending channel. You know, if it gives a red engulfing through the bottom of the move, let's see how 805 acts, and we can actually think about starting some reloads on Invax. Looking at the daily candle, it looks a lot better. Yesterday was red candle number 1, red candle number 2 coming on in. If red candle number 3 comes on in towards this 8 level tomorrow, and fills this gap, I think that is going to be a reasonable area to maybe think about hitting some reloads on some of the shares sold up north of 9. It still has to get there first before anything is set in stone. Veil, we're still showing some patience. I want to see it get back down underneath these 1250s. I really hated myself for not testing this last adjusted trend line. It caught a nice little bid, tested over 13s. Okay, let's see if it can show some rejection. Just trade sideways off of this newer set trend line, and if it's able to do that and catch a bid through this middle ground, then we'll be very confident, or we'll be a little bit more confident in the position that we have. So now uh, Nikola coming down to these 120s. Wasn't able to take out the lows yet. So we'll see how this acts at this 116, and then after that we can think about, you know, finding an exit point for this name. End phase giving up 125s. Okay. Okay, it looked like it was going to show some continuation to the downside. Let's see if this name can get down to those 120s either today, tomorrow, maybe next week. But that will be one of the watchers for uh, moving forward. Down in these 120s, you know, I know it looks ugly right there, but I see a lot of potential with this name, and I'm very excited to see it play out. Just gonna need a little bit more time to breathe. We thought that, you know, we said that since it showed that it could get over top of these lows and reclaim 130s yesterday, that, you know, we felt reasonable putting the order in around this range. You know, it looked like it was giving up the ghost, but we thought that it was possible that it could wick back up. And, you know, it still has a lot of day left, and buyers holding those 125s for right now, so not terrible. Not terrible. There's definitely worse names to look at. You know, I'd just say the shorts have control. You guys know what I say about short-term moves. Short-term moves is just a big voting machine. If more liquidity is taken off the books than sold off the books, then bought off the books, then the price is going to go down, and that's what I think we're seeing right now with end phase. Uh, I mean, we could go over the financials on end phase, but I'm gonna try and find some movers. This R taking out the highs, testing towards that wick. Is there anything that we can see right here? Uh, a nice volume increase. Not really, only 14K in this candle. So really not much volume with this name. Let's see what this GMBL looks like. Gapping up, wicking into this level, not able to get to that gap. So that's a very interesting look and a decent amount of volume, 24 million on this name. We said that, look at that wick pressure right there. Yesterday was kind of an indecision day. Is it going to be able to catch a pop? I'd say it still has some clear resistance at 18 cents. So we'll see where that gets from there. And Nikola, we are going to put an alert on this name if it gets down to, we'll say 118s. We'll add that alert back in and we'll think about playing this name. We are on the bid at 116, so we will see. Warner Bros. Kind of giving up this trend line. We're right into it, actually giving it up as we speak. Had a beautiful look right up here. Just I think some of these names being red, NQ turning red, not helping this. Well, which is all right. We'll see where it goes. Let's take a look at Tesla. Tesla looks not very good. I would say this looks like a shortable level for Tesla. You're still in that oversold area. Some reason my chart is not set up on Tesla, but I would say this is a clear channel that we have drawn out. Something like that. And you probably still have an uptrend. So by no means is it like, oh, look at this descending channel. He's got it coming down into the 90s. Uh, you know, it's just not a parallel channel either, which is interesting. Clear rejection from the top end of this range, just marking those tops. I do think that Tesla has some good support built in here off these 210s. If this shortable level, down the 215, this gap doesn't catch a bid and this trend line gets discredited, I think you could see some exhaustive moves back down, testing into this sort of neckline area, maybe even an exhaustive move down to start would be this gap. It does it catch a bid from there? I don't know. I don't know. Kind of what I said with Disney, the longer Disney traded around this flat bottom, this is a Geo we have pulled up right here, but the longer it traded at that flat bottom, the more it looked like, okay, we're going to have a flat bottom break and we're going to trade down. It's kind of what Geo's looking like right here. Uh, but I will say it is green on the day when we're seeing some weakness. You look at the 15-minute, continuing to hold these levels right here. It opens up down kind of right into this sort of trend line right here. So if this was able to catch a bid, uh, maybe there's something there. I'd say probably your best bet with a lot of these names looking like they're getting just tore up is maybe taking a look at the NASDAQ short. It did discredit that tight channel that it had, but it does have a tight channel to the downside that is kind of meeting. There's your tight channel to the downside. Looking at the chart, coming right into that 34, opens up at 1850 and then catches a strong bid up to the top end of that channel and right around that middle ground. So I'd say, NASDAQ short, not looking terrible, testing into those highs. Those 1850s was support. Uh, but I would say even better support. You have some gaps down here. So here's your neckline wick, and then you have a gap filled down here in these low 18s. If it does want to show some rejection here and kind of trade down lower, maybe you could see some false wicks, but if it does show more continuation to the downside, you have one, two, three different gaps that were not filled before it started that move to the upside. So maybe a potential buying window here, but a potential buying window here as well. So we'll see. Baba giving up the 90 level. Nikola right at 118, so we'll see if these 116s can catch anything, but you can see bear flag pattern right there, giving up the lows on the day. We'll see if this 116 has any weight to it, and we'll think about getting out of this name for today if it shows more continuation to the downside. But I'm not giving up on this yet. I do think it's going to be very difficult for this name to turn red on us overall. But we'll see. We did have a lot of trims still on this initial move up to those 170s, and even up to those in the middle of those twos. We had quite a lot of trims on the name, so I'm not going to make it sound like we took all those profits north of three. But we did make out pretty good on this name, and testing it below our original entry and getting that size back on. Maybe there's something that can work out with this name. Uh, it doesn't look good as of right now, but all it would take is a little bit of buying pressure off those 116s. Maybe it has to come back down and test one. Maybe it does. Oil, I would say oil names could be potentially put on watch. The big story with oil is that this is a weekly red candle number two, and you can see it wicking into those upper 70s. So if it can catch a bid and try to reclaim those 80s next week, that third red candle wicking down in towards this level on your weekly, you are a positive break on strength. And if we match that up with the daily, you still have positive strength on your daily. You can see off the daily kind of your descending channel. We were fully aware that oil could potentially be red these next few weeks or these next few days. That first red candle coming on in, second red candle coming on in, has a descending channel, has your previous highs meeting in these upper 70s, but it was a clear trend change when it was able to break that downtrend. So I would say if you were really scared about market movement over the next few days or even the next week or so, that oil could be a catalyst for some for equity names that could outperform. And that's where we got Devon Energy. Our average is right around those 50s. It is what it is. I'm not gonna act like it's the end of the world. It's still small position. But the catalyst for Devon is that we have this trend line. It's wicking down towards that trend line. Strength is right around that middle ground, and you got a dividend coming up. Uh, Oil continuing to be elevated. I'm very interested in looking at some of these oil earnings in Q3, which we still have quite a bit of time left before we get there, but that doesn't mean that oil is also going to stay elevated in these 80s. For all I know, oil cracks the trend line or gets back down towards that uptrend, and we see oil back in the 60s, for all I know, which is sort of that support level. If oil is back in the 60s, what type of numbers? Oil has still continued to be able to put up those high margins, operating and gross, and they're still buying back shares. They're still paying out solid dividends. I think that is a winning formula for a long-term investment. And if it's able to have a catalyst from that, up in these 80s, I think there's also room for uh, higher margins, higher operating efficiency, more buybacks as the shares, looking at Devon, they're increasing their output of oil, and if oil stays elevated, that just goes more dollar value to the bottom line. So that's going to be more cash on hand to be able to buy back more shares. You know, you know, I don't see what else you'd be looking for in an investment. Uh, if that is the original reason why I wanted to buy it in the first place, I don't see why it would change with oil being more elevated. But, we'll see. Time will tell. I am going to be very interested in looking at those oil earnings. Looking at Nikola, you can see the stair step action. So, the 120 order is in the money. I'm not going to make it sound like it looks perfect until it gets discredited. I don't think it's going to give you a straight trend change where it blasts to the upside. You still probably have some sort of downtrend building. Well, we'll see how it goes. Baba turned slightly into the red. NVAX trying to hold 850s. Warner Brothers kind of flirting with this trend line. Is it going to break down the trend line? Is the trend line set proper? I would say if you were giving it some leeway, you could give it that last little wick touch, and now sort of trying to hold right now. So is this something that's going to give you this curl? You can see sort of the frowny face being made. So if it does want to come back in, I'd expect 1250s to be good support. If 1250s give up, maybe we need to relook at this name. It does have support built in near these 1225. You can see some multiple taps coming on in here, but discrediting the trend line, is that going to be something that is worth putting on watch for maybe an exit? Maybe, just maybe. But we'll see. GM giving up 33s. Uh, so kind of as we were talking about, um, are the higher lows going to keep coming on in? I don't know. Uh, it's giving you that curl. Like, are the buyers going to come in the middle of this green move? Maybe. But I'm a lot more interested down here towards these 32s. If this trend line were to give up, I think it's a name that I would probably hold against me. You have some reasonable support levels, as close to 30 as you can possibly get. Seems reasonable for a company that just got done putting up a $1.90 EPS. They put up a 220, $1.70 gap, $1.40 gap, 225 gap over the last, three earnings reports, maybe four earnings reports. And they're expected to keep putting up those monster gap earnings and non-gap earnings. Eventually there's going to be some give. And if we're looking at paying off an investment, if they continue putting up a $1.50 EPS, that's $6 EPS a year. We're looking at paying off the investment in 5 years just in the EPS. So I do think that there's solid value. And normally, these lower gross margin companies, which car businesses are lower gross margins, uh, I think that they normally do trade at a little bit less of a premium because they have those low margins. But GM also uh, a bigger competitor in that car space. So we'll see. Looking at this monster move to the upside, if I were to look at this as some sort of retracement, you can see this 30 half is that 702. So if it does want to come down to that 702, I think that not only is it a solid support level, I think it's a reasonable area to be thinking about punching long. Even date back to 2016 before they were really putting up monster earnings. It traded very well around this range. I think if you're looking at it as a long-term investment, it's a reasonable look and a reasonable add in these 30s. And that is everything. I see Foot Locker catching a little bit of a bid, kind of probably some sort of relief rally. I know when you're talking about cutting dividends, that is not going to turn well in the short term. But long term, I would say Foot Locker, just because of it has decreasing revenue, I do think that there is going to be a point where if it got to the right price, where Foot Locker would be a reasonable add for the not a super long-term investment, but maybe like a 2 to 5 year investment. I do think that they will be able to hold on strong. But obviously you're gonna have to see more information to be able to tell when does that bottom give up. You guys see, uh, once that momentum switches to the downside, it is hard to break it. Once those shorts kind of get in control, it is a tough thing to break. So I don't know. We will see. Disney, how close did we get to that gap down there? I'm probably not going to buy this gap. Uh, not that I don't believe in the company. Not that I think that this is not going to be able to hold. It's more so just I just want to let this breathe. You can see the red move to the downside. You can see the continuous wicks, no movement up, kind of discrediting the flag pattern to the downside. But you can see sideways action, flat bottom break. We talked about it multiple times. That doesn't mean that I'm a genius. I hold Disney long term. So I'm holding those shares kind of against me as we speak. But I just don't know if if people are buying into, okay, we're getting back to those 2014 to 2018 Disney. No, it's just not there yet. I do like the talks of free cash flow in the last earnings report. I thought the last earnings report was a good step in the right direction. But are they going to be able to get back to 2014 to 2018 Disney? Just not yet. So if you're looking long term, Disney, I don't think is going anywhere. So, if you were looking at this as a support level, maybe it's not a terrible ad. But I'm going to be greedy. I'm going to try and get as close to 80 and maybe into those 70s before we think about adding some more. NVAC's giving up that 50 level. When does this wick of buying start to come on in? You can see the indecision candle. Now we're getting more into this green move from the previous 2 days. If 850s can hold right here, I wouldn't be surprised to see some resistance at those 870s. But I'll be focused on maybe reloading this name tomorrow. You got the green move on increased volume. Yesterday was decreased volume. Today, I'd expect another candle of decreased volume. If that third day seems light volume and it's trading in near this 8 flat, which is the gap fill at 808, 805, 807 is the gap. I think it could be worth a reload there. But obviously, we're going to need more information to be able to decide that. Looking at some of these other movers, GNS, still a nice sideways chop action. It is trading quite a bit of volume, but kind of light volume on the day. Let's take a look at the 15-minute chart here. It is up 3%. You can see a couple green candles coming on in the open of the day. Right here acts like it's going to give up these lows and now kind of building a U shape. If it's something that can hold, maybe this GNS play is worth taking a look. You can see the sideways chop action. You can see the exhaustive move down, just tested the original neckline break. Boom, breaks the neckline. One retest back down towards 1 before it pumped up to 175. Could be something there. Hmm. FVR, we do hold long FVR. You can kind of see the catalyst that we have mapped out right here. Have a potential ascending channel. Is this trend line going to be able to hold? We only have 2 points of contact. Or you could say, wick, wick, wick. Oh, that counts as 3. No, I look at these types of moves. I count that as 1 point of contact. I want to see it catch a bid, get up to these 29s, which it almost got there. But then I wanted to see it hold these 2750s. We'll see if it can do that. It's pretty close, I would say. If I had the bet with a lot of weakness, you can see a lot of weakness on this chart right here. If this does come in, it does have this little wick that it takes out yesterday, so a retest of those 2750s seems reasonable. But I think it's going to need some time. Looking at he did kind of break down. It filled that gap today at 1204. Take a look at this. Gaps down, gives that gap fill on the opening candle, and then catching a bit, kind of a sideways chop action. Really not a half bad look. If it did get over top of these 2530s, which I mean it's very close, could be something that starts that stair step. You see the action right here. Is this something that we want to try? We can run a tight stop underneath 1215s. But I do like this setup. You see this sideways action. All it would take is a green candle to come on in, and this would catch a bid. Warner Brothers did give up that trend line, kind of discrediting the reason why we even wanted to add some of it today. So I would say probably gonna have to come back down and retest towards these 1250s. We will see. NVAX, you can see it's still trying to hold the bottom end of this channel. Let's see some of these top movers to the downside. AMC 14. Oh, they did that stock split. That's what it was. Yeah, I would say looking at the daily chart, um, God, I hate when stuff stock splits because now I don't know where I had my stuff at. Ah, this is all you really need to know. You know, actually gapping down right to that. I said I was waiting for a break one way or the other. I would say you're probably good to take a short. Oh boy, that sucks to say that. That sucks to say that. I can't remember who was coming on in here saying, "Hey, this is getting ready to break." I said, "Nah, give it a chance. Wait for it to break this channel to the upside." When now we're getting a break to the downside. Yeah, I don't know. Wolf. I forgot about this name. This was an earnings play we were looking for. We said, oh, gapping below the channel we have set. Oof. Oof. Yeah, I'd say probably just show a little bit of patience there. Everything was given this look. Everything looked like a short. I'm not surprised that these tech names are getting sold off today. Path. Uh, Holding up fairly well, actually. Path, I want to see this continue to get rejected. And one thing that I really like about this is that one, oh no, hit that back up there. Um, a solidified channel to the upside, a solidified channel to the downside, and actually was able to push back up to these body candle highs. Path is a very interesting setup right here, and I think 1450s as we get close. This is why does it keep getting rid of my uptrend? There we go. Jeez. Uh, yeah, towards these 1450s, I think is a reasonable look, if I'm just being honest. Looking over at NKLA. Still looks like a short. You can see the sort of descending channel look that we got right here. Whether it keeps following that, if it does follow that, that 116 is where we're looking for ads. NVAX still trying to hold these 50s. N-phase trying to hold these 25s. Looks like more continuation to the downside. NASDAQ short actually acting like it wants to break through this sort of tight channel. I'd say probably NASDAQ short. If you're looking shorter term, I would say your NASDAQ short's probably not a half bad bet. It is right at the downtrend right now. So maybe if there is some resistance, maybe some of these names can catch a bid. I'm not going to say that, oh, we're right at that downtrend, it's catching a bid. No, it looks pretty strong. You're getting a positive break on this 15. You know, a name that's holding up well is Neo. We've had it on here for a while, and you can see it's just held this level like a glove. Still in this tight channel to the downside. All we said is all it would take is a gap up above that channel, and maybe we can adjust that channel a little bit. Ah, man, it's just you can see it trying to hold sideways at this support, which is that 1050 something gap. Not a half bad look, really. In all honesty, I'd say Discover Financial still starting to reject that level a little bit, but getting very close to that out of that oversold area. You know, banks probably have the best look for the day. Uh, I'd say BAC looks decent. It never got to that oversold area, but a nice hold of the trend line. I wouldn't be surprised to see this test up towards that 21 and then come back into those 28.50s. Devon did turn green on the day. Disney got as low as 84.10. Where's that gap at? The gap is at 84.07, so getting 3 pennies off of that gap. Nice red move to the downside. So, I mean, uh, is it going to be able to hold that area? Probably not. Probably not. Geo still holding that 7 range. Is getting close. There's a neckline here at this 732s, the wick high from Tuesday. Not terrible. And Disney very close, 1 penny off of that gap. And there is an official gap fill on Disney. Doesn't look like any gap fill buying came in. Nasdaq short really starting to push that downtrend. I would say this is, if you're looking for strength on the day, I'd say shorting the tech names is probably a safe bet. Obviously, size accordingly. Yeah, there's nothing really that looks good until we see until probably this Nasdaq short starts seeing some rejection. I would say there isn't really anything out there that looks super great. We can take a look at Boyle. Boyle really catching us some volume here. We did have a trend line set right here. I don't know how much is truly added to that, but a nice sideways action. If this is good shares bought for a flat top at 77, that's a decent return. Even from current price, we're looking at 26%. Nikola, even with everything kind of just washing out the bottoms, Nikola strangely, it is down 8% today, but strangely holding all right. Strangely. Uh, is it going to be able to catch a bid through that? It's got some really tough levels right here at this 125, so maybe not. Foot Locker, a nice ascending channel look. I'd say even potentially over top of that tight channel to the upside. Interesting look there. Warner Bros. Sneaking back up above that trend line. I would say that this red candle, this volume increase, there is some wicks of buying right here, so keep that in mind. But this really wanted to start curling and give it up. I would expect a leg down towards these 1250s. Nasdaq short is showing a little bit of wick pressure up here. I would expect, some good buying to come into the middle of this green move. A lot of green volume, even relative to when it was pumping up high, that volume is still extended up right there. Honestly, this looks good for continuation. I know it's not a popular thing to go on and say that the Nasdaq short looks good, especially after Nvidia put up quotation marks here, monster earnings. It was up at, where was it up off this first candle? We were up trading up in the 490s. No, I'm not saying that, I just don't think that the earnings were that great. You know, it was a flashy earnings report. Don't get me wrong. Really flashy earnings report. What do I know? I just think it's just not there yet. That's my opinion. I just don't think the price justifies the earnings that I seen. And I'm very I love when companies are buying back shares. Don't get me wrong. I love when they're buying back shares. But I'm not a fan of companies buying back shares that I think are overvalued. I think there's a lot better ways to use your capital. If this AI boom is such a huge thing and the data centers is such a huge thing, keep reinvesting that capital into it, man. It's just I don't see it yet. I just don't see it. Up here, I would say it probably looks good for a short against strength. A lot of times I like that conviction when I'm buying a company down here in this weakness, knowing that it's gonna go high or lower. Well, same thing right here with Nvidia. I would say that this price, if it does come back into the gap fill at 472, I would expect it to catch a bid. It looks strong. The earnings were very flashy. All it would take is more people to buy liquidity off the book than to sell. And yeah, I would expect it to keep going up. But if it does keep going up, where do the shorts really hammer in and say, okay, enough is enough? Uh, it's time to take control of this name. I just think that Nvidia bought back some really overvalued shares. Personal opinion. Maybe I have no clue what I'm talking about. Who knows? Disney really giving up the ghost. Flat bottom break at its finest. End phase, flat bottom break at its finest for continuation to the downside. This one trying to hold up, I would say, looks good for another leg down. It sucks to say that. The Nasdaq short is putting in potentially red candle number one, so 1, 2, 3 red candles to the downside could be expected. And then from that red move, is it going to start catching a bid? That would be the scariest part. Invex giving up the channel. I would say, probably coming down the 807 gap today. Very possible. The only thing for stocks for us is, Discover, trying to hold these 90s. It's giving them up as of right now, but a nice couple candles to the upside. Now 1, 2, 3. Now kind of giving that stair step look. Does it hold the start of the gap, which is at 89.50? I think that the valuation's clear here. I would say the best look for the long, I would say off of this list is probably Baba. So I'd say potentially some China names, but you can see it's holding up fairly well. It's actually green on the day, gaps up, and it's holding that gap. It gets a little bit below, but not a half bad look. There. Actually, I'd say, DFS probably the best look, maybe the bank name, but it still has some levels that needs to work out to the upside. Nikola is still just holding this level here at these 120s. Is it going to be something that kind of discredits? I don't know. I was expecting actually that, all these people were going to be pumping these AI names. I would say that after looking at the Nvidia earnings, I expected it to be up. I didn't expect the Nasdaq to be down 1% today. I will say I'm a realist when I'd say that, looking at the earnings report, it's very flashy. I expected the Nasdaq to be green today. But looking at it, the Nasdaq short just looks extremely strong. You see the buying pressure still coming in on the name. I'd say this he doesn't look half bad. Shout out to Hal. I'd say he doesn't look half bad. I think if you wanted to try it, outs underneath 1190 seem reasonable. Other than that, it looks like, until there's any type of strength that comes into the market, I just don't think that there's going to be anything. Maybe a bank name. This Franklin's ETF. I'd say this heat doesn't look half bad. I think I might go test the waters with it. It showed that green candle move up to 40s. Now wicking into that. So, maybe Howe is on to something. It filled the gap today at these 12s, caught a nice bid. Here we're at these 30s. If this is something that's going to show some continuation to the upside, I do think that looking at the daily chart, it's going to still have some levels that need to be trimmed. It's going to have to fight through 50s as well, but man, there's nothing really else that looks any good. Maybe a Foot Locker, but when does it, if it got up to those 20s, maybe it just gets hard rejected. That's very elevated to the downside as well, or not elevated to the downside, but very weak name on strength, still negative 577. That doesn't mean that it can't go up during that, but man, that is an exhaustive move to the downside. A nice kind of U build right here. I got very close to that gap. Possibly see air. Let's see what this looks like. Right into a level. Gave up the ghost. Still a descending channel probably. There, SLG. At the daily, that's not a half bad look there. Piton, no. Farm, no. Boil. It's a decent look, but I mean, Invax is probably the best setup, actually. I think an order right off that 807 could be reasonable. A firm reports after hours. Not a half bad level that's trading at, but I don't know, just everything kind of just looks like a short. Everything's kind of putting that wick up to that level and then kind of giving it up a little bit today. So it's kind of interesting timing that up with the earnings that, some would say that, the Nvidia earnings were absolutely monstrous. I don't really see it that way, but, Disney really giving up the ghost, giving the look like, hey, down the 80. Down the 80, that's that real next level. But when does the bleeding stop for the name? I don't know. Nasdaq short candle did turn green. Opening green. Is it gonna make a run for the gap? The gap's up at 20. Nikola open of the next candle. Trying to keep wicking down towards into these 120s. 120s keeps holding. He is showing that stair step. Look at this. Look at that look. I would say he probably the best little setup right here that I'm finding. Probably still early to the ball game in terms of a longer term look, but you know he I would say is probably the best setup. Nasdaq short continuing to the upside. ENPH really giving up the ghost. Nice red candle. You know, I'd say 120s is the next area. How do we act down there at those 120s? GM, I'm not surprised to see this showing some rejection. But I would say that down towards that 3250 could be an area that we think about. But I think closer down the 32s is going to be an area we're really looking at. Disney now a whole dollar out of the money compared to that gap. You know, the gap, getting beaten down. This is a flat bottom break at its finest right there. All in all, I mean, if there's anything anybody else is looking at, by all means, throw it in the chat because the only thing I would say has any legitimacy to it, which is a weak name, it's not something I would say, oh yeah, you're golden holding it. But this I would say is working pretty decent in the money right now. Has a nice stair step look, and maybe that ELIQ. That ELIQ, I'd want to see it keep showing some continuation to the downside, but you know, you got the indecision candle, wick high, trying for continuation. Nice green volume, almost 400K and then 620K volume on these two green candles. I would like to see it pull further into this green move though. I mean, if we're looking at the half around that 250, that 250 range is what I would be thinking on. I don't think this is a day where go against the trend, and the trend is the Nasdaq short. If you're looking for something safe, we talked about it when it was right at this channel. Is if it's able to break this channel, if the market's gonna have a chance today, we're gonna want to see that start getting rejected. But even looking at the daily, you can see your strength is still there on the daily. On the weekly, you're not going to be there. So by no means is this set in stone, but there are some reasonable levels to the upside, and the first level is not out of the question. It's very close at 20 flat top gap right there. Is it going to get there today? It very well could. Uh, bank name. BAC, wicking into that previous wick from 3 days ago. Uh, early in the day when it was showing strength and the Nasdaq wasn't as beaten up, I would say that I would have said, let's see 29's print, see some rejection, and then we can keep playing this trend line if it gets back down there. Yeah, I just don't see the long today. Nikola, is going to be one that we keep on close watch. This 120 level for some reason keeps holding. But the catalyst is that, made out very good on this name to the upside, held a small piece in, and today is the first day we're trying reloads in off this last retracement. If that's able to hold, maybe there's something that can be given there. But we also are on the bid at 116s. I'm really questioning the 116 order off the gap with some of the movements. But I mean, it all makes sense. Everyone raving about this NVIDIA earnings, which I would say I'd be shocked if it doesn't go and take out this high eventually. You got strength on your side. It was a monster earning. It was a flashy earnings report when you're looking at the percentages. But there are some clear negatives that were in that earnings report as well. And I would say the biggest one is, they bought back 7.5 million shares last quarter. I just think that is poor use of capital. I think that the stock is overvalued, and even initiating a $25 billion program, share buyback program, if they're executing that, I think they're out of their minds. At a 50 plus price of sales, I just think there's better ways that Nvidia could use their capital. That was my biggest knock on the company. The margin increase up to 70%, boom, music to my ears. The type of growth numbers that they put up, music to my ears. I'm not discrediting them for that. I'm just saying that at some point in time, there's got to be a difference that you put from the company. Great company. They're doing all kinds of great things. They operate well. I think their operating efficiency was around 46%. Absolutely insane, saying that they were reasonably around that 50 to 60% gross margin. Now to have 70% margins and operating over 40% is insane. Insane. But eventually there's got to be a give when you're looking at the stock price compared to the company. There's got to be a time when you put that difference in there. And, I wasn't buying it. You're not going to see me buying Nvidia up here over 250. I'd say if it got under 250, okay, now we're thinking about it. But when you're talking about, yes, they beat. They were expected 208. 208, if they put anywhere close to 208, you would see this name probably down towards in the 300s, in my opinion. It is a bigger beat. Gap EPS at 250. If you're looking at, okay, let's say looking, they're able to put up $4 of EPS a quarter. That's $16 of EPS a year. How long is it going to take Nvidia to pay off this investment? That's saying they're able to put up over $4 of EPS quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter. You take, let's say 480, which was a reasonable price that it was trading at today. You divide that by 16. We're looking at 30 years of paying off this investment. Guys, to me, that just screams overvaluation. It does. And people will probably knock me for that. People will probably say, "Oh, you don't get it." I do get it. The company is a great company. It's just the stock price is garbage. And I'm not making myself sound like a genius because the stock has done this today. It's just there's no way you could get me to touch this up here. Eventually there's got to be a difference that you draw a line in the sand and you say It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me, so that's why I stay away from it. If it runs up to 700, great. If you got that, great. That's why I own VT. VT, I own the whole world economy. I own Nvidia through my VT index. Man, I'm a genius, right? I own Nvidia. I'm a genius, man. Owned it for this entire move to the upside. Man, I'm a genius. You know, if I'm going to go out of my way to buy an individual company when I already own it in my VT index, it better make sense to me, and it doesn't make sense to me. So, you know, I hate to look at this move that we've had in the market today and try and use it to add credibility to what I'm saying, but it just doesn't make sense. The same way Tesla doesn't make sense to me. And you could say, "Oh, you don't get it, man. Tesla's the future, man. You just don't get it." I own Tesla. I own it in my VT index, dog. I mean, come on. I'm a genius, right? But all in all, you can call Tesla a tech company all you want, but when 92 or 90 or 88% of your sales come from cars, you're a car company, man. And when you're looking at 7 consecutive quarters of decreasing margins, issuing shares left and right, diluting all the shareholders, having over $450 million every single quarter in stock-based compensation, eventually that puts a toll onto your company. Eventually it does. And then that's not even going into the flood of the amount of production going into cars. You go look at any CPI over the last however many there's been. Look at what the deflationary aspects of that CPI print are. Cars is the number one. Oil was number two a couple times in there, but now we're seeing oil get elevated again. Uh, cars is the number one. When you add an influx of supply and demand will play its role. That's why you don't see me driving a fancy car around. And I'm not saying this means I'm not touching car companies. I'm buying GM. I think GM, I mean, if we compared Tesla putting up 90 cents of EPS or projected 80 cents. Let's say Tesla puts up $1.50 EPS a quarter. That's $6 a quarter. Tesla at, we'll say 200. We'll be on the safe side. And we'll divide that by 6. We're looking at paying off our investment 33 years. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. Now, if it runs to the moon and Tesla's up at 1,000, I own it in my VT index. Okay, great. I'm a genius. I'm a genius. But when we're looking at adding up some of these EPS and even giving them credit to the upside and saying, okay, even though Tesla's issuing shares, that's going to be harder to drive EPS. Even though they're giving out 450 million of stock-based compensation every single quarter, we'll give them credit and say they'll put up $1.50 EPS, and it's still over 30 years to pay off an investment. You go look at a GM. GM GAAP EPS last quarter of $1.80. The quarter before $1.70, $1.40, $1.40, 225 GAAP EPS. We'll be on the safe side and say, hey, GM's not going to be able to put up those type of numbers. We'll say they only put up $1 of EPS. That's $4 a year. At $30, we'll even say 33 because it's been trading around 33. Divide that by $4. At least we're looking at paying off our investment based off EPS in under 10 years. Okay, this is something that makes a little bit of sense. Now, when you add $1.50 and you're looking at $6 of EPS, you pull this calculator back up, 33 divided by 6. Okay, 5 years. Okay, then you add in the perspective of it's a lower margin than Tesla. It only operates at 4%. Its gross margins are only 10%. Okay, that makes sense on why you wouldn't pay as much of a premium for it. But at the end of the day, if they're able to put up $1.50 EPS quarter after quarter after quarter, you know, it makes sense for an investment. So to look at GM, comparing it to Tesla, does this trend line look reasonable to take an ad on it? Yes, it does. To me, it does. And if this trend line breaks down, okay, and we're paying $30, we can put a line in the sand at 30. Is it a support level? You see resistance, you see support, you see support, you see support, 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 resistance. I can draw the line in the sand and say, I think I'm getting fair bang for my buck. Call me crazy, call it a boring company, all you want, but at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie. So say whatever you want about me hating on some of these big tech, and honestly, looking at some of the big tech, I would say, Apple is going to be that driver of EPS. At least they're reasonably around that area. When it was down here in these 120s, I was still skeptical of the Apple. I was still skeptical in saying that, hey, I think I can get this $96 gap. I know that might sound crazy, but at the time, I felt I had the conviction that, if we get even close, call this a support level right around 100. This was kind of how I had my chart set up with a descending channel marked in there, and said that, hey, if it got exhaustive, I mean, obviously a lot of fear was in the market. But when we're picking up VT, in a sense, we were already buying. We were already buying Apple. Um, I don't know. Maybe I'm just an average Joe that doesn't get it. Maybe I just make no sense whatsoever. But at least I have something that I can fall back to and say, hey, this works for me. It might not work for you. So um, I don't know. Maybe I'm just ranting on, and maybe Nvidia runs to the moon and it goes to 1,000. I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, if it made an exhaustive move like that, I'd really think about developing a short, a longer term short for maybe 2 3 years out in advance. Because when this bull move is done on Nvidia, which I think they're absolutely insane for buying back their stock, it's a company that invests their money well. uh, I don't see why they would stray away from investing if the data centers, the AI, and all that stuff is really the future. I don't see why they are straying away from investing into that, into themselves, instead of using that capital to buy back overpriced shares. It really makes me question the management, and the management doing a great job. The company's great, don't get me wrong, but it makes me question. There's just something that's off, and maybe I just need to have more information to understand it more. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just a guy. I don't know. But looking back at the Nasdaq short, I'd say if you're looking for something strong, playing strength, you're punching in higher. Maybe you can catch a couple red candles. Once this first red candle comes in, I'd switch it to an hour chart. Whoops. Hour candle, 10 minutes left, 12 minutes left on this candle. If it can show some continued strength in these last 10 minutes, maybe you can catch your first hour candle coming back in the 1950s, and I'd say, maybe that's a reasonable add. Looking at Disney, I'd say Disney looks like a short. I would expect, if you're trying to play some bottoms for just a trade today, uh, as soon as this hour candle ends, maybe you can catch a green candle into the middle of this, scalp 50 cents. Some of these longs just aren't adding up. But everything off this hour chart is going to look kind of junky. I would say index maybe, but you're breaking through the bottom of a channel. But looking at the daily chart, you do have this juicy little gap right here at 807 meeting in with some levels. The middle of the green move, you have increased volume, pullback candle number one. Decreasing volume, pullback candle number two. Hasn't started putting those wicks in yet, but maybe this play this 8 level, and then you can run some stops underneath of, call it 790, give it 10 cents or whatever you want to give it. That could be something that you could see maybe catch a bid a little bit, but the short looks good today. So, I bought ENPH today, first average in since our 160 average. We had a 166 average on the name, and I thought it was undervalued here. I thought it was undervalued here. We were extremely patient. We were waiting for this strength to kind of get back to that middle ground. And we averaged it in the end phase today. I think it's undervalued, and obviously picked the wrong day. We weren't patient enough. But long term, I'm not interested in selling end phase down here. I will be patient for these 120s, and if 118 to 120 comes on in, we're going to be buying more end phase, because this is something that makes sense to me. Personal opinion. Warner Brothers coming on into those 1250s. Put a wick down to these 1250s, gives up the trend line, tests the top end of it, now giving up the ghost. I would say, it has a reasonable trend line that could hold right here. If it gives up 1250s, I don't know what I would say. I would maybe think about just giving up, taking a loss on it. You know, we started the position off the neckline off those 13s. We thought that we'd catch a bid sort of in this day, kind of giving up the ghost, but your strength was near that middle ground. You know, it was a reasonable look, but now as we're just trading sideways right here, if this doesn't give up, you know, we could be seeing 1225 support come into play, and after that, you know, you could be seeing a breakdown. You have a gap down here towards these 1140s. You know, I wouldn't be surprised to see that come into play. But there's your trend line look. I think it looks all right. Looking at BAC. BAC still trying to hold a decent candle. Maybe bank names are where the rave is at today. And you can see Discover, you know, wicking into that 91 level. I don't think that this bottom is in yet. You probably have some sort of descending channel building out right here. But this is a company that makes sense to me. You're looking at putting north of $3 EPS a quarter, $12 EPS a year, looking at paying off the investment, and you know, we're coming on, you know, 7 to 8 years. High margin, operates very well. Free cash flow margins very well. Just paid a dividend, so maybe there's going to be some exhaustive selling pressure to the downside still. But, you know, we'll see. Nikola strangely holding this 120 like a glove. Uh, you know, eventually this is going to have some give. We're either going to put some sort of candle to the upside, but it looks like it is going to break it down. Extremely light volume. That is a bad sign. When you see a red candle like this, another stair step to the downside on some increased volume, and then you see three candles of, or at least two candles right here of super light volume, that's going to give somebody the idea that, hey, I can short this because there isn't any buying pressure, and boom, you get a leg down. We'll get filled off of 116 and then probably end up getting stopped out. But in all honesty, I'm ready to be out of Nikola, so maybe that's the reason why we tested the waters with it today. But you know, I expected a lot of buying pressure to come into the market today with Nvidia apparently putting in the greatest quarter of all time. But you know, at least I have a little bit more respect for the market. Maybe they are kind of seeing it the same way that I see it. So I don't know. I don't know. Uh, you know, I talked about Nvidia, you know, before I went on vacation, is that if it ever got over 500, I would just be shocked. And it tapped over the 500s in the after hours yesterday, and in the pre-market today, it was still over the 500s. Well, that's my rant for the day. Let's go see how he's doing because we really wanted to try it, and he had the best setup in our eyes, and we might have just been a little bit scared because the the strength wasn't there, but it is sort of approaching, getting closer. I do think that it has some levels that it still needs to fight through, but you know, if we tried that I think that was really the only thing that we seen that looked reasonable. Maybe the boil, but I mean, it still has some shortable levels. Filled the gap, and it's still trading a little bit under the gap. If I was thinking about playing an earnings play, I'd probably go HPQ. You risk getting this gap down below this, but I do like the long here on HPQ. Looking at projected, 85 of EPS, got a reasonable dividend payout ratio of around 25%. And a monster trend line. This is a nice sloping trend line too. So I mean, your earnings risk is a large gap down into these mid 20s, but this is a no-brainer long if it gets down into those 120s, my opinion. Nikola down to these 120s. ELIQ coming right on into this 50 level. It wicked right into those 55s. Hey puppy. Alright, I'm gonna let the dog out. Alright, let's go outside. And we're back. I'd imagine nothing has changed. Everything looks like it's in the dumps. I would say that it looks like a knife. But this gap fill right here off of 808, maybe a neckline test. But kind of right in the middle of this green move to the upside, give or take. That 618 meeting up around that 8 flat. I think this could be something worth keeping an eye on. But I mean, obviously the trend down, getting beaten down, a lot of red volume. So I'd say a lot of stops potentially getting executed on the name. Uh, is what it is. I'd say Disney finally catching a little bit of relief, but I'd expect if this caught a bit up to the 83.50s that it's gonna keep getting beaten down in my opinion. Uh, right after giving up this monster level at 85s, obviously everything just kind of came on in. Warner Brothers still trying to hold 1250s. Wick low on the day is 52s, so not quite getting down to those 50s. End phase, wick low down to into the 122, so I'll be damn. Uh, we'll see what it does at 120s. I'm just gonna put an alert right off those 120 55s. If that ever triggers us, we will be ready for 120s to come on in. NKLA surprisingly still holding this 120 range. Unbelievable that it is. We are on the bid right here at 116s. We're gonna give it a chance and maybe can think about it here at these 112s, but it looks like it is gonna keep on falling on down. If I'm being completely honest, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a retest of those 150s somewhere in here. Whether it has to come down and wick down in the ones, and then you have a gap at 91. I don't think we're gonna be holding it down that far. God, Lord, hopefully we're not. Hopefully we just freaking rip the band-aid off and cut it before then. So I think that will be the play. Warner Bros. Tested down to this wick low. Looks like it put a new wick low at 1251. Is this trend line going to be able to hold? I mean, I don't see any other way we could set this trend line. Maybe we can give it a little bit of leeway. But if this Warner Bros comes on in, it kind of gives that same credit to this sort of red move. You got a few candles to the upside, and then boom, gives out that trend line and a bear flag continuation to the downside. Would seem reasonable. GM now below our original 32.90 entry, so now every share that we have of GM is now out of the money. I'm an idiot, right? I'm an idiot for buying GM. Just kidding. Uh, FVR, I'd say 27s is still reasonable support as long as it's above that. We built in a really nice position. Cost average still in the 25s down here. But if this does start discrediting, it comes back into play where we're playing this 25 level and then we risk it giving out this bottom support where you have some support levels down into these lower 20s. This is your 24 half, which is left leg, build the neckline, try to put a false right leg in. Doesn't exceed this high, come back in, put another neckline in toward these 26s. So this is kind of the catalyst that we were looking at before. But I can see you do have a gap fill here at 2341, so maybe that's an area that we need to drop down to. But monstrous pump up into the 330s, all the ways back in, held support right off this neckline at 26s, catches a bit up to 50 and pulls right back in, fills and taps our true neckline right there. Gives a pop, and now is it going to be able to hold trend and be able to break higher? I don't know. I'd say as of right now, the way everything's kind of mapping out is I'd say have some capital in case this continuation holds strong. Nasdaq short. We are on to the next hour. But catching more continuation really gives that feel like, hey, we're gonna go test up to 20. Maybe that's a catalyst for a little bit of market movement to the upside if this Nasdaq short can show some rejection. But honestly, fighting through these lows early, fighting through the downtrend, and now trying to get up to that gap fill. I think there's just going to be light buying pressure. There's a lot of positive looks to this and a lot of green volume coming in, giving the feel like, hey, continuation is going to be the play. As you can see, positive strength holding on the NASDAQ short, had a tight channel over the last 4 days, pulled right into our 34, which is right in near some of this support. If I was marking this high, it does get a little bit below that, but those 1850s to just give it that whole 50 cents, massive move off of that. So, is this going to be the end of the move? Does it wick on in back inside this tight channel for the day? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe it does. I don't know. NVAX still showing some continued downside pressure. Could have had some more aggressive trims on this name yesterday when it was testing above those 950s. We were able to get 40% off the position. We're still holding that 60% just because I think you have strength on your side. You're kind of trading in the middle of this green move. You have nice support built here up at this 8, and you have a gap fill at this 807. I don't see a reason to let the market move to the downside, kind of dictate my judgment on this name. I do think that this can test up to 10. Which is the true flat top. But I mean, if you were looking for one thing to do, just mark the bottom of this green candle, which is at a open price of 958. So I accidentally marked 57s, but no close. We have one small close above that, but wicking into that level, I'd say until it can get over 58s or over 50s again, probably not reasonable to expect the most amount of buying pressure. I wouldn't be surprised if it wicked into that and caught a bid, but what a what do you know? Nvidia is still fairly holding up. I would say, it was a pretty impressive earnings report, but just not my cup of tea. If you told me right now they were gonna grow at 100% every single year, okay. Every single quarter they're growing at 100%, okay. It's probably a buy. But eventually the bigger you get, the harder it is to grow. So I mean, they're putting up that quarter this quarter, maybe the next quarter it looks identical, and the quarter after that it looks fairly identical. But that following year, I'm telling you, when that top comes in, uh, that is going to be something to watch out for, and not something that I will be a part of. Well, I guess I own it in my VT, so I don't have a choice because I'm owning that for the rest of my life. But you guys get the point. Tisha, trying to hold this level. ELIQ. Let's take a look back at that. Nice move. That was 55 is pretty much the 618. We went from the green move before, but that's your half if you go from the green move. That's your half if you go from just today. Where did we have that 618? I thought it was a 618. Maybe it's a half. You have a nice half meeting in right there. Is it going to, it does break this tight channel to the downside, has some wick buying on each candle. Trying to break over top of that, but is this something that's going to be able to hold? I mean, I don't know. NKLA still trading at this 120, giving a frowny face, giving a look like, hey, we're gonna blast through this low. Coming on back in. Uh, Not a lot of increased volume, but a full red engulfing candle. So would have had to been pretty good if we got that entry in here on these 25s. Would have been good at taking that profit. And if I were to take a trade on anything today that I'd consider a day trade, something I don't want to hold into the close, I think I'd be pretty quick at getting those trims off early. But I mean, I say that, and then I had NKLA bought at 25s and 20s, and on the bid at 16s. So maybe I just have no clue what I'm doing. I haven't looked at PayPal at all today. I'm so happy to see it down. If there is a name that I'm happy to see down, it would be PayPal. I want to see this down underneath 60s. Neo does have an earnings report pre-market on Tuesday. That could add the wrench into the equation for this tight channel, which I'd say, just mapping more of the red move, just keeping it parallel. Given the feel like if it does reject right here, kind of setting up the flat bottom for a boom continuation to the downside. You have a gap down here at 960. You have a gap down here at 830 or 1030. You have gaps down here at 830s. You have gaps down here at 770. Is this going to be something that just comes all the ways back in? It very well could. NVAX getting awfully close. Wick lows down to 812. We're going to set an alert right off that gap. We're not going to put an order there, but let's set that alert off at 810. See if that comes on in. We'll watch that gap fill live because I've talked about it so many times. We'll watch that one live. Looking at the movers for the watch, I would say awfully small moves for today. Wet G coming all the ways back in. Into the level. Wick, wick, wick. Elevated volume. Really not that much volume though. Probably looks like washout top to me. Wouldn't be surprised to see it take out the complete low today. I do got to keep an eye on that ELIQ. If I was going to try something, it would probably be this name just because, I think the longs probably have control, but the shorts on your daily have control. But a lot of volume coming into this name if I was going to try something. Wicking into this flat bottom break, though, where it gives it up, test it at that 350. Look at the wick high for today. 371. But I mean, if it did catch that continuation, I'd say, with it catching a bid up to the top end, filling this gap here at 6, maybe you could say it has some resistance at 6 that it could pump to. But 350, I mean, draw a line in the sand. That's where I would definitely be looking to cut this name for sure. If you got that entry off of 2, that neckline break, you're buying it into that resistance right there. But obviously it panned out for you today. So somebody took that long at 2. We can see what it did as soon as it did that. That's when it really started going. So I mean, it gives you the move. These first 2 candles, extremely light volume. Only have 16 and 17K. But then when you truly break that 2, boom, look at that volume increase right when you break 2. I love looking at stuff like that when just seeing what's going through people's heads when once you get to a certain price and just seeing that, man, it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, just marking that neckline right there in those previous lows, meeting up right at a 2 level, it makes sense. So clearly the right person was in short. You know, maybe they were in short off of this beautiful high right there. You see that volume increase 63K. I would say that's probably some shorts getting in for sure. And they're telling themselves, hey, if it gets back over 2, I'm out. And that happened. That came on in today. So, uh, you know, a decent look, but this 350 level, you know, you do have some high volume, 430K in this candle. There is wick of buying and selling. So, is this something that's going to be able to take out the highs on the day? I don't know. Let's look at the volume movers for today. Mullen number 1. Nice slow churn to the upside. How about that neckline break? Look at when the volume really takes off. 1.1 mil on this first volume break for a neckline break, and also able to break through that high and the gap. So I mean, even if you waited for that 50 break, this was pure gold. But even this following candle mapping up the continuation play, 2 million in volume for that name. AMD eating it up today. True negative break. You have a tight descending channel, I'd say. Here we are, testing towards that 100. Doesn't have a gap fill in there, but just marking the body highs. I'd say 99 to 98 could be reasonable. You probably have some sort of trend line that you're meeting today. So is that trend line set perfectly? Probably not. It reminds me, I gotta look at Workiva for a buddy. Eating it up a little bit. Looks like a short. Looking at the weekly. Still positive weekly strength. I'd say that 200 daily, probably a good area. I'm just gonna pull up those levels and see where that's trading at now. It's been a while since I took a look at it. Sitting around 92.30. I'd say you probably have some support built in towards those 90s as well. Looking at the weekly. Warner Brothers right at that 50. I mean, is it going to be able to hold this 50? I mean, when I go to this 15-minute chart right here, I'm probably going to say no. But it's trying to wick into those 50s, gets as low as 48s. I'm absolutely shocked Nikola is still holding these 120s. Even had that volume increase, looking like, hey, we're gonna break down these bottoms. You know, it's still not out of the ghost yet, but I think if it got over 122, which is these body candle lows, maybe this could be something that catches a bid back up to the open price of the day, which is 130s. Warner Bros. Nice wick of buying right there off of those 50s. GM also putting that wick in. Disney looks like a flat bottom continuation break to the downside brewing right there. Trading on in ELIQ. I gotta make sure I keep an eye on this one. I just don't think. I just don't know. Maybe not today. I wouldn't be surprised to see it go take out the highs. IRWD. It looks like a short still. Retested that 950. E. Tesla looks like a short. You know, you could say, oh, it's holding this like a glove. Maybe it does start that stair step and we see it give the move back up into those 235s. But I would say I would just caution NVIDIA, trying to hold up, but you can see the descending channel. Gap fills at 471. That's where I would say probably your best bang for your buck. Oh boy, we do get a gap fill on this. Where is the official gap? We got a gap fill. Close at 98. So let's move it right there, and you can see that direct tap of 98. So if this Nasdaq, claims these 20s now, that gap is filled. And I don't see too much more. You have this flat top resistance right here that met at that downtrend before. I, I would just caution. If this really puts a pump through those 20s and gets over top of this, I mean, it's going to be a slippery slope where, 2018s could be an area, but after that, your next gap is a nice pump. So, I mean, by no means is this market move to the downside. There's still a lot more movement that could take place. Nicholas still at these 120s. I don't think I've even seen it move yet. Setting up flat bottom break more than likely, but on the commodity we are starting to set higher lows potentially. I'm not going to say that means that this is set to go. And then looking at the weekly chart, we have that little false positive break where, here's your catalyst for those 90s that we talked about. So look back at ELIQ, putting that red candle back on in. So maybe a 250, and then give it those 10 pennies, or we'll give it 15 pennies of risk, but those 250s got to come on in, which probably isn't going to look the greatest because it's below this wick, but I'm looking for a quick wick back up and looking for a true reclaim of 3. I can go see where some levels are on this name, ELIQ. Just get a quick look. I mean, the news, it doesn't have any PR. I'd just say it was a clean 2 break. VWAP is right at 3, so I'm not surprised that you see it reject right there. But if it can reclaim 3, that's where you could see that exhaustive move back up to the highs. So definitely some potential here. Let's go ahead and put an alert in at those 260s. Warner Brothers, a nice 1250 hold. Putting in a nice green candle on, decent volume. Not going to act like it's the greatest volume, but decent volume. BAC still slightly in the green. You can see it. Look at that 1250 level. I don't even think I've went to the 15-minute chart on this. Look at this. If I was going to say something, I'd say you have a nice trend line. You have a nice stair step. You have your previous lows here at 2850 when it was holding it. It gives it up, rejects it 4, 5, 6 times, and then a nice green candle right through it, pulling right back into that 25 level. That is tempting. I gotta say it's tempting. I mean, we just bought the name off the 28-28 gap. Man, that is a juicy look. If I was gonna say there was something, so we are seeing a little bit of pressure off of that first gap, taps it on the money for that NASDAQ short. So if I was going to try and add any type of positive sentiment to this market, is that as long as this holds underneath 20, we could be seeing a retracement. You know, a nice green move. We go look at the hour. Does this third hour candle start leaving that wick top, and then we have to see 1, 2, 3 hours of consolidation into the middle of this green move? FVR, you know, looking at the hour candle, it's nice red move to the downside. 1, 2, or is that third candle going to be where we start giving that curl back to the downside? Looking back at the 15-minute. E dropping below, so you know, if I was gonna say is that 1250 was resistance. And why would I say is, you know, it's in the middle of these three wicks and you have the body candles. We said, you know, it's going to have to get over and hold above those 1250s, but also just putting a wick into the red move from yesterday. So if this starts giving that stair step look, you know, does it need to come test back down to 10? At 10, I'd say it looks like a short. We have our neckline marked. If we go to a weekly, that is our neckline. So we're waiting for sevens on this name for a long-term ad. Invex. Looking at the daily, about to get alerted right here at these 10s. This 807 gap, how does it act if it gets down there? Let's look at the 15-minute here, down 10% on the day, falling like a knife. A lot of increased red volume. It does. Is this true longs getting out of the position, or are we just looking at some profit taking? And you know, is there going to be a reload that comes into this name off this 807 gap, and maybe it needs to drop down to the neckline? Warner Bros. A nice 1250 hold. Now still down 1% on the day, but I will say that this is notable. If this does come back down in and hold this trend line, it could be setting up a neckline break at these 60s and still catching a bid. I'd say BAC right at those 2850s, giving up the 34. But I'd say you probably still have this trend line. And as long as it holds these 2850s, it wicks below it a few times here, wicks above it a few times here, starting to put in a candle for this uptrend. And the Nasdaq shorts still starting to show, hey, we're gonna put in a red candle here. Let's pull into these previous highs at 1980. Where I'd say probably for today, Nasdaq short is probably a safe bet. Um, You are seeing some of these tech names catch a little bit of movement to the upside. Tesla with a nice 230 hold. If we look back to it, I said, it probably looks like a short. I still agree it probably does look like a short, but they are catching a little bit of movement to the upside as this Nasdaq short is seeing some resistance. NVAX never did trigger those 810s. Nikola's still just sitting here at these 120s. There is a ton of size on the ask here at 121s. 4,000 lots. $4,000 on the ask. Man, just trading sideways, giving that feel like, hey, boom, to the downside, we're going to go. Well, enough time is definitely passed on that ELIQ. Let's go back and take a look at that. Up over 3. I'll be damned. I would still say I'm probably going to be waiting for these this 260. Probably just respect this 34. If it gives up VWAP, I'd expect a lot of shorter term traders to say, hey, I'm out. So if it wicks back underneath this 3, this is right where that VWAP is at. Are we going to see this give this curl and hold, where we can start the position, get some stops underneath? SQ continuing to put this red candle in. BAC putting in a nice green candle. Still just a ton of size on those 121s for Nikola. BAC catching a nice little pop. I would still say it's got a lot of levels to work out to the upside, but still a very nice green candle and just mapping out. That 48 low right there is your last retracement. So possibly a catalyst there for catching a bid. But, I would just say the 28 level, the 28.50 level looks decent. You have a decent uptrend. If I was looking at trading something, maybe it would be this. Obviously, the movement isn't that great, but I think it's a reasonable look. Warner Bros. Rejecting those 60s, close to 60. When does the knife stop on? I think if C limited does get down to these 30 flat range, I think that is reasonable for ads. We'll think about it. As high as 360. This is an interesting level down here on Roblox. Nickel actually up to those 121s. I don't believe it's taking out the size off of that. I'd be shocked if it did. Yeah, there's still a ton of size off 21s. Neo, given the look of a flat bottom break, we've mapped out some levels to the downside. If it stays inside this tight channel, I would say probably going to get that continuation to the downside. So showing some patience with this name, but only down 1% on the day, where it is at a decent support level. This 1060 is probably that line in the sand off that gap, but it does have another gap down here at 1030s. If it gives out this flat bottom, I would say this probably has no chance, but maybe some wicks down into the this previous high back in June. I would still, find a value name. I think Bank of America around this 28.50 is reasonable. Shows a nice green move, comes right back into this flat top, draw a line in the sand. Has some good action off the 28.28 gap yesterday. If this trend line gives up, you have your fail safe here at 28.25s. And I do think you probably do have a little bit of leeway to play with this trend line, just mapping out some of these gaps. But you do have this gap fill down here at 28s, which, that's really where I'd say the position is built anyways. But a decent trend line look there. Warner Brothers is probably the next on list. Is you'd have a reasonable trend line that you can look off of. It is wicking, continuing to wick up towards that 13, which I would say if I was looking at this as a bear flag up towards that 13 for a break of that trend line, could be a really good short. For you get some movement down. You have a gap fill here at 1130s, and you have a gap fill down here at 950s. I wouldn't be surprised to see that come into the cards. If I was looking for strength on the day, though, I'd probably say banks and possibly oil, as oil is continuing to wick down towards that previous high. You're in a descending channel, so probably not over yet, but the bigger picture is probably your weekly chart. Here's your pull for a bull flag, pullback candle number one, pullback candle number two, each one acting like it wants to leave a wick. Next week, I'd expect pullback candle number three into some of these levels. You have a neckline here around 75, so if oil is around 75 next week, we're going to be punching oil. And that's probably not the popular move. But all it would take is for next week's candle to leave a decent sized wick, and you could see this start giving that curl where, is this some sort of start to an ascending channel? Uh, Maybe, but it is a flatter style of channel right here. I would not be surprised if we've seen it start, this bull flag start panning out to see us start testing up towards that 90. Where if we get up to 90, this 80 level is a pullback area to pull back down into. And if we look at this as a retracement, we'll take as many wicks as possible right into those wick highs, pull this all the ways down. There's your 90 level meeting up at the half. If you start getting up into this 702, building the long down here makes sense, and trimming up near the highs makes a lot of sense. But if you see $100 oil, we've seen what Q2 and Q1 earnings looked like when we had oil down here in these 60s and these 70s. They still were able to put up decent margins. They were still buying back shares and had some and still continuing to pay out decent dividends. It's a winning formula for a long position. If they're able to put up margins like that down in the 60s and 70s, what type of margins are these oil companies going to put if oil were to try and reclaim 100 again? It's going to be very interesting Q3 to look at, as majority of Q3 has been oil above that 75 level. So if they're able to put up those types of margins and increase production when oil was down in the 60s, I'm just saying right now that the NASDAQ short catching some resistance right off that gap. Let's go back and just take a look at that. Let's clear out everything. This is all you really need to know, is that, today we did have a break of the descending channel. Just not a perfectly set channel yet, but just adjusting it a little bit. You'd break that downtrend, but a clear rejection off of this 1998, right off that gap. I mean, you can't draw it up any better than that, but still, pullback candle number one is in, pullback candle number two in the works, testing these highs of the body candles. Pullback candle number three pulls on into these wick highs right in here around 1965. You could see this start giving a move. But with the extended green move right here, I'd want to make this into 3 candle moves, where that hour candle, we still have 12 minutes left, but you can go back to when we filled that gap. I stated that, if this third green candle starts making a wick, we could see 3 hours of pullback for this NASDAQ short, where you have some respectable levels in the middle of this green move, and maybe the 30-minute chart's a better look to go off of, where 1, 2, 3 pull back towards that 1950, where you could see this NASDAQ short really start building that U shape. And if that bull flag right here on the NASDAQ short gets discredited, maybe you see it we go over to the daily candle and we'll clear out everything. Maybe you see this candle wick on in into the middle of this red move for today, and then we see it have to come back down and test this true neckline down here, which gives a nice beautiful tap. Hold of that 1850 was gorgeous, so maybe if it takes a while to get there, maybe in the middle of next week, that 1850 level ends up being a support level that holds. But I would say that the Nasdaq short, respecting that gap, you can see it right there to the T, and now coming back into 1975s. Look at BAC, still in right around this 50 level. I don't think that this is out of the clear yet, but you know, if it tests back down into these lower 28s, that is going to be interesting for me. Looking at Warner Brothers, truly testing up to those 60s, so a nice trend line hold, but I would expect this to have to retest this and try and set some sort of higher low. Uh, I think the catalyst is there for this name. It's still fairly weak, but fairly close to that middle ground where all it would take is a reclaim of that positive, which is probably going to be your 13 test. If that starts to reject, you're going to see a positive break, a little slope back to that middle ground. And if you see it break over top of that 13 decisively, I'd say your flat top up at 1450 is reasonable. And also a retracement level that you can look at. You can see that 14, a little above that 1450 is that 702. Where if you see it start breaking over top of that flat top, maybe it needs to test it, pull back into that 1350, which you do have reasonable support in right there. Around that 1325 down to 13, even a neckline. You could see it just coil, and then when it gives that break, I would expect some resistance up here, but if it breaks over top of that, this flat top gap, in my experience, when this gets filled right here, it doesn't hold any regards for it. The longs will have full control of this name, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this print up towards this flat bottom break. Hold, tries to hold, gives it up. It has no retest, but if this really kept panning out, you could even add into perspective that you probably have a downtrend marked in right here, and you're wicking into the top end of that downtrend, and maybe it just needs that for this uptrend to truly hold. So I'm not going to get shooken out because you know some of these tech names are getting beaten up. I'm going to stay true to these trendline names, and yes, I understand that I risk it gapping down on me, but this is just what makes sense to me. Looking around elsewhere, GM, I'm excited to only have a small position in this name, but I really like this support down here near these lower 32s. ENPH, you know, we did average our first average since the earnings report. We were so patient with this name. I am extremely excited to see this continue to get beaten down, even though, you know, my average got moved down to 139s. It was at 166. We got it moved down to 139s today. I do think that this name is overvalued. It just looks like a short. Your strength isn't there. We have an alert in front of these 120s. We're going to play this 120 support and down in the 118. If it really goes south, this 106 gap is not going to be taken lightly. That is going to be where we really build that position out. But this 109 direct gap fill, we had a touch of greed where we were saying, hey, it's a weak name down here. Let's see it truly get down to that 106 gap, and then we can play 100 for a fail safe. Just didn't come on in. So end phase, I am extremely excited about it. Obviously, the chart setup doesn't look the greatest. But if you're talking about just looking at pure valuation, I think end phase has it there. You have to understand that the guidance for this quarter, not the greatest look, but if you're looking long term, I think this name is a really good name to keep on watch. Personal opinion, of course. Veil, I cannot believe we didn't try these lower 12s. I really just want to see it start getting rejected. You can see it getting close to getting out of that oversold area. But if this comes back in anywhere close to 25s, we are playing this like a buying opportunity down here. Still holding these 1270s, which is the gap down price. Is what it is. PayPal, I want to see PayPal give up 60s again. Now that, it was a little bit hard to play this red engulfing candle to the downside, and also giving out these lows. We have good till cancel orders off of 56 and 55 half. We have the gaps at underneath 55s and the gap at 54, which is the plan that we're going about with PayPal. I think this name makes sense to me. I think they have a reasonable footprint in what they do. Oh boy, I almost fell asleep on Nikola. Look at Nikola. Oh boy, putting in a nice green candle. The first reload on this name is now in the money. But we do have 20 fills. We're on the bid all day at 116s. That 116 gap, we were super patient with this. Had a lot of trims on this name and this green candle. Best print on the name, a little bit over those 350s. We were so patient with this name. We even held restraint of averaging back in, reloading off of the original entry of 48s. Oh man, talk about, it just didn't make sense to try it when it was putting a red candle right through the lows. But now, catching a little bit of a bid, it filled this 26 gap, which is what the first order was today. And we bought 20s. Why'd we buy 20s? Um, I mean, it may seem crazy, but we looked at it as that last retracement. You see that 120s right there, holding like a glove now is what it looks like. But we were looking for wick lows into that 16 where we were going to try it. Honestly, now I'm going to go take that 116 order off, because if it does give up the ghost right here, that wick low at 118s, I don't even want to try it. But just add salt to the wound of how many times I've missed a fill by pennies. By pennies. 116 was our bigger size order that we had. Man, it, shocking that I was able to take out those 4,000 lots. I really thought that this name was going to get pushed down to that 116 with 4,000 lots, just holding like a glove at 121s. But just because it's catching a little bit of a bid right now, I'd still say your flat bottom break is the close from yesterday. It gaps down. It did show a little bit of strength to fill that gap. Luckily, I'd say that's a better look for it. But is it going to be able to hold? Tough to say as of right now. But coming on in, and NVAX never did give us that fill. Tapped up back up towards 25s, but how does this gap at, it shows it here at 106, but I'm pretty confident at 107s. We'll see. We will see. BAC still holding that level. Trying to show a little bit of a test up in. Candle number 2 on the NASDAQ short still. I'd say it's not out of the question to see this takeout days high. But looking at the hour candle, should be closed now, 3 minutes. Leaving that wick top, it just would make sense for this to pull back in. So maybe there is some hope for the now, I wouldn't be surprised to see this next hour candle try and show wicks up towards that 20. And if it claims 20, I would say you are golden on that NASDAQ short. If it reclaims 20s, it has some resistance up to 2010, which is also the wick low, the first move, first candle down on Monday. But man, I would say that it looks pretty good. Discover Financial still trying to hold those lows. So when I go to a 15-minute here, it's going to show you that, it comes all the ways back in towards the gap up wick and trying to hold nice volume increase here. I would say has a descending channel look, but I think this is a monster level here around this 90. If it can close above 90, I mean, that would be the start of maybe something that's brewing, but I would say I call that a monster level at 90. And we have an average on this name a little bit above 92, so by no means am I perfect, but I'm very excited to see this DFS position play out. Nikola, is this candle going to turn green on the day? It's tough to say. But let's see what some of these other market movers are looking like. Mullen coming into the top mover on the day. How about that candle? A lot of volume, 170 mil. Volume 232 million the day before. Looks like it is going to exceed that. Let's take a look at ELIQ. Holding above those 318. So, maybe, I called out those 255s. I said 255s, and 255 is a low. You can go back earlier in the live stream if you guys want. Called out 255s. It would be a possible entry for the name. And when I looked over at it, it was, setting a close on that candle around 266. I mean, setting up the flat top, I wouldn't say it's out of the woods yet. You could call these potential double tops, but with this volume increase right there, holding a nice green candle, as long as this doesn't wick down in the last minute of this candle, I'd say you're probably pretty decent. We said this was a good look, but now rejecting those 1250s. I think patience could be necessary with this name, but we'll see. Tisha. 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 Slow churn, light volume. I would say I'd stick with that IL or ELIQ. Personal opinion. Nasdaq short pullback candle number 2 turning green in the last minute here. BAC wicking in towards those 56s. Is it going to be able to hold 50s here? I'd say if you were drawing the line in the sand, if it gets underneath of just marking these wick lows, marking the body candle, if it gets underneath 48, I think that kind of discredits this short-term trend line that it has on the day. But all in all, the bigger picture for the name is that you have a monster trend line rolling through, something like that. Nikola up to those 130s. Even that wick low, is it going to be something that's going to be able to hold out for the day? 132 is the close from yesterday, so maybe something worth keeping an eye on there. But all in all, I mean, end phase down to those 120s, 118 is that next window we're going to be looking for. I'm still just kind of waiting to see if NVAX is going to wick into this 807 level. Looking at oil, I'd say oil with a nice bull flag continuation, testing up towards this flat top. Is it going to be able to claim 80s today? I'd say that's probably what you'd want to take a look at for, but I mean, I don't see anything else that we can really do for today. Geo giving up the trend line over the course of this week. Uh, kind of looking like it's going to be a flat bottom break. It is leaving a wick down towards those sevens. Uh, if this, I mean, this is looks like Disney all over again. We said it early in the day when it was a green candle that the longer it trades down here, the more that 7 level looks like it's the line in the sand. Where if you get underneath that, the selling pressure could easily take over. No question about it. Neo trying to wick into that green candle from yesterday. Disney actually finally putting in a green candle. I would just switch to an hour chart on this. There's your green candle, pullback candle number 1, pullback candle number 2. A lot of time left, 55 minutes left, so I would expect it to close maybe up a little bit higher. But pullback number 3, is that going to be the start of something bigger? I'd say your safe play is probably oil. Oil in the short. Oil in the short. Oil I just like the long catalyst for oil. If you're looking, year in advance, you could be easily seeing oil print over the oil index itself printing over 100. If it does print over 100, some of these oil companies are going to be bringing in the cash. That cash is just it's so good. The cash is overlooked so much. Everyone is super hyped on the growth aspect of things. At the end of the day, I gotta see those profits. I gotta see those profits. These tech names are catching a bid. Nvidia probably the rave of this move, but you can see it coming on in, breaking that descending channel. It doesn't need to push up to these 490s, pull back in, and then show that continuation. You can see the catalyst for that U-shaped build right here. ELIQ. Uh, is this going to be the test that we can try here at these 270s? Maybe. It's just, man, this would be your neckline break, so you'd be buying it and having to be patient for that 325 break. Obviously, you can have prints into 3 or the middle of this red move, but I mean, this volume increase that we've seen, the candle moves aren't really that much, so definitely some selling pressure, but also getting below these 290s, which I don't know. BAC still holding these 228.50s. Getting as low as 27s on NKLA. So by no means is this out of the water, but a very healthy candle on that print up. 845K in volume. That reminds me, I do gotta go take that 116 order off. I'm not gonna buy it. But we will think about putting some outs for the name when the time is right. I don't know if it's gonna be today, but BAC giving up 28.50s. Taking a look over at BABA, probably a descending channel, but still holding the uptrend. Warner Bros. Trying to hold these 60s. Nice slow churn on Boyle. I mean, that is another area that's showing a little bit of strength. You can see pullback candle number 3. Looking at the hour chart, given the feel like, hey, we could easily have to be pulling back in here. The long for today still seems reasonable. I don't think there's any reason to just go and panic and get out of a bunch of names. But I will say that the Nasdaq short does not look half bad. Nvidia getting very close to those 490s. I would say that's where a bit of that resistance is at. A pullback seems reasonable. But I would say looking very strong. I'm sure some of these tech names all have these last few candles all green. Those big tech names are looking fairly good. I would say the best look, in my opinion, is probably the oil. Probably oil. Talk about a flat top. Devon Energy looking very good. Retrospect to the oil chart that is setting up as well. I would say that this
wicking down close towards this uptrend multiple times, that I would not be surprised to see this nice bit of volume coming in on oil. But I mean, guys, I don't have anything else for you. I'd love to sit here and just beat a dead horse, but I mean, I've spoken what I'm looking for the day, and that's gonna call it for the live stream. I appreciate anybody who tuned in, and we will see you on the live stream tomorrow.